Today, we are peeling back the layers of a tale that's as ancient as the Bible itself, yet as fresh as yesterday's headlines. It's a story of a mighty warrior, unbreakable on the battlefield, who met his end not from an enemy fire, but from the betrayal of a lover's hand. They called it the modern-day Samson and Delilah, a fearless general whose strength was sapped by the woman he trusted, leading to a brutal, intimate downfall. A man who dodged bullets in the jungles of Uganda and Congo, only to fall in the quiet suburbs of Kampala. Buckle up, because we are going all in. No shortcuts, no summaries. We'll exhaust every twist, every allegation, every heartbreaking detail. So with that, let's step back in time. It's November 10th, 2009. Dawn is breaking over Namuwongo, a bustling suburb in Kampala, Uganda. The air is thick with the sounds of early morning life, roosters crowing, distant traffic crumbling, neighbors stirring as the city awakens. Inside a modest home, tucked away in this working-class neighborhood, a couple's argument echoes through the thin walls. Voices rise, sharp and accusatory, over money, trust, and betrayal. The man, a towering figure dressed in military fatigues, his presence commanding even in his private space boxes, and slaps the woman. He throws her onto the sofa, his hands closing around her throat in a grip that speaks of rage unchecked. She pleads for him to stop, to leave, her voice breaking with fear and desperation. He doesn't listen. Instead, he storms towards the door, his words slicing through the tension like a blade. He's going to grab his gun from the car outside and end her life right there. Terrified, cornered in her own home, she grabs a hollow iron bar from her bedroom. As he turns away, facing the exit, she strikes. Once, twice. He crumbles to the ground, blood pooling on the floor in the dark, spreading stain. She doesn't run. She doesn't hide. Instead, she calls for help, her voice trembling as she admits what she's done. I killed him, but I didn't intend to.
Till the day of the crime, Irao tells court that on 10th November 2009, around 6 a.m., she had 3 loud bangs as she prepared to go for morning church. She tells of how she had someone screaming for help in Uganda, Mujemu Nyambe. Leaving her house, Irao went in the direction of the noise. She says she saw the accused, whose name she did not know then, hit Kazini twice, uttering the words, "Die now in the hands of women." Irao was shocked, adding that Drarul then dropped the bar she was using to hit the victim. She sat down and made a phone call in which she said, "I have killed him."
The man is Major General James Kazini, a feared and controversial army commander, a giant in Uganda's military world, known for his role in wars that shaped the nation's history. And the woman, Lydia Draro, his 28-year-old lover, a survivor from the north who claims she acted in self-defense against a man who turned from protector to aggressor. But in a country where power imbalances run deep, where military men often wield unchecked authority over civilians, and where domestic violence lurks in the shadows of many homes, her story raises haunting questions. Was this premeditated murder or a desperate bid for survival in the face of imminent death? And in the shadows of their toxic and unequal relationship, who was the real predator? This isn't just a killing, it's a clash of power, fear, and fury that shook Uganda to its core, exposing the deadly undercurrents of domestic violence in a society grappling with its post-conflict scars. A young woman's fight for her life against a man who promised protection but delivered pain. betrayal, and threats. Even now in 2025, Lydia Draru walks free after serving her time. Yeah, she did serve her time, but right now she's out of jail. But the scars of that night linger like ghosts. A stark reminder that love can turn lethal when trust fractures, and that the line between victim and perpetrator can blur in the heat of violence. Her case didn't just end with a verdict. It sparked conversations, influenced laws, and forced the nation to confront the hidden epidemic of intimate partner abuse. Tonight, we dive deep into every detail: the origins, the fatal morning, the investigation, the trial, the cultural ripples, and beyond, unraveling the full, unfiltered story without holding back. Disclaimer: before we dive deeper, a warning. This case involves graphic details of domestic violence, physical assault, threats with firearms, and a brutal homicide. It touches on themes of abuse in relationships, especially those involving extreme power imbalances between between military figures and civilians, as well as the psychological toll on survival in a post-war society. My goal with Beneath the Rift is to honor the truth, not sensationalize suffering, to explore how systems fail the vulnerable, how one act can spark societal change, and how justice, even when served, leaves lingering questions. Viewer discretion is advised, particularly for those sensitive to stories of intimate partner violence, trauma, and the harsh realities of gender dynamics in conflict-affected regions. And with that, let's step into the darkness. Welcome to Beneath the Rift. I'm Rose Basemira, and tonight we are heading to Kampala, Uganda, a city of vibrant markets, resilient communities, and a history shadowed by military might and long shadows of civil strife, where trusted relationships can be a lifeline in the midst of economic hardship and social upheaval. But power dynamics can turn deadly, especially when one partner holds the weight of a uniform and a gun. In 2009, that darkness claimed Major General James Kazini, bludgeoned to death in his lover's home, in a moment that blended passion, violence, and desperation. The woman at the center, Lydia Draru, a young mistress from the war-torn north, who admitted to the act but swore it was self-defense, a last resort against a man whose aggression had escalated beyond control. This story mirrors the betrayal in Sharon Otieno's case from last time, if you didn't watch that episode. A powerful man, a trusting woman, a relationship laced with promises of support and peril of abuse. Like Sharon, who climbed into a car with the men tied to her lover, only to meet her end in the forest, Lydia trusted a man of authority, who turned aggressive in the privacy of their shared space. Kazini's military stature hid a volatile side that erupted in domestic fury. And tonight, we unravel Lydia's story step by step, delving into every nuance, their backgrounds, the build-up to that fatal dawn, the forensic details, the courtroom battles, the societal fallout, and what happened after. To see where love ends and survival begins, and how one woman's act of desperation became a catalyst for change in Uganda's fight against domestic violence. Let's start with the people at the heart of this tragedy, because understanding their worlds, their histories, and the stark contrasts between them reveals how this fatal clash ignited. like dry tinder meeting a spark in a storm. Major General James Kazini was born in 1957 in Hoima, Western Uganda, into the Basongora ethnic group, a pastoralist community known for their resilience in the face of marginalization. His early life was marked by limited formal education. Kazini didn't attend school beyond basic levels, a common story in rural Uganda during the turbulent 1960s and 1970s, when political instability under leaders like Idi Amin disrupted lives across the country. Instead, he found his path in the military, joining the National Resistance Army (NRA) in the early 1980s during the Bush War that ultimately brought Yoweri Museveni to power in 1986. This was the time of guerrilla warfare, where young men like Kazini were forged in the fires of combat, learning strategy, survival, and ruthlessness. In the dense forests of Ruwero Triangle, Kazini rose quickly through the ranks, earning a reputation as a fierce, no-nonsense commander who didn't shy away from brutal realities of war. By the late 1990s, he was at the forefront of Uganda's involvement in the Second Congo War, leading UPDF forces into the Democratic Republic of Congo (DRC) from 1998 to 2003. This period was his peak of influence, but also the source of his deepest controversies. The United Nations panel of experts accused him in 2002 of plundering Congo's natural resources, the diamonds, gold, timber, and coltan, on a massive scale, funneling wealth back to Uganda and enriching himself and his allies. Reports detailed how Kazini and other UPDF officers set up networks to exploit mining operations, with Kazini allegedly overseeing the extraction and export of millions in minerals. These accusations painted him as a war profiteer, contributing to the blood diamond narrative that plagued the region. His military tactics were equally contentious. In the DRC, Kazini was linked to human rights abuses, including summary executions, forced labor, and the displacement of civilians. Back home, he faced internal scrutiny. From 2001 to 2003, he served as Chief of Staff of the Uganda People's Defense Force (UPDF), the highest military position, but his tenure was marred by scandals. In 2003, he was sacked amid allegations of creating ghost soldiers, fictitious names on payrolls to chiffon funds, and then also insubordination. A court-martial in 2005 charged him with abuse of office, but he was acquitted in 2008 after a protracted legal battle that highlighted divisions within the military establishments. By then, Kazini was a shadow of his former self, undeployed and disgruntled, nursing grudges against the system that had elevated and then discarded him. Personally, Kazini was married to Phoebe Kazini, with whom he had 4 children. He was known as a heavy drinker, charming in social circles but impulsive and intimidating, commanding respect through fear as much as loyalty. Friends described him as disciplined in battle but reckless in life, with a string of extramarital affairs that reflected the entitlement often associated with high-ranking officers in post-conflict societies. At 52, he was a larger-than-life figure, a survivor of bullets, bombs, and political intrigue, who seemed invincible until that fateful morning. Now, Lydia Draro, alias Satsem, was worlds apart, a 28-year-old woman from northern Uganda's Acholi region, an area ravaged by the Lord's Resistance Army (LRA) insurgency from the 1980s to the 2000s. The North was a hotbed of conflict, with Joseph Kony's rebels abducting children, massacring villages, and displacing millions. Daro's early life is shrouded in obscurity, But like many Acholi women, she likely grew up amid displacement camps, poverty, and trauma. Little is publicly known about her family or education, but she moved to Kampala seeking stability, escaping the Northeast instability for the capital's opportunities and pitfalls. In Kampala, she worked odd jobs, perhaps in informal sectors like domestic work or small trade, living modestly in Namuwongo, a slum area known for its mix of migrants, low-income earners, and vibrant but precarious community life. Dwaro met Kazini around 2007, becoming his mistress in a relationship that blended affection, financial dependency, and volatility. Kazini provided for her, paying rent, giving money for upkeep, but the power dynamic was unequal from the start. And she had a niece, Proskovia Tobaro, then 16 to 19 during the events. That was like the age, living with her, adding to her responsibilities as a de facto guardian, described by witnesses as quiet, resilient, and unassuming. Dwaro saw Kazini as a protector in a city where women from the north often faced discrimination and hardships. Court records reveal a pattern of arguments, often fueled by Kazini's jealousy, drinking, and suspicions of infidelity. This is a married man. Sometimes the thing is just funny to me. A married man being jealous of the mistress. You're married, but the mistress has to be stuck with you when you even have a wife, probably other affairs elsewhere, but you're jealous about your mistress. That doesn't make sense to me at all. Every time I think about it, it just doesn't make sense. But I had married men are the most jealous men, actually. Not jealous of their wives, but of their mistresses. The confusion is too much. Anyway, like many such relationships in Uganda, it was an open secret, tolerated in a culture where powerful men having mistresses is common, but rarely without tension. Dwaro's mother from the Acholi community reportedly warned her about the risks of entangling with a man like Kazini, whose world of military politics and wealth was far removed from her own. Whispers in Acholi circles spoke of danger, like dangers, abuse, abandonment, or worse. The survival needs kept her tied. In a society recovering from war, where women bore the brunt of displacement and economic inequality, Dwaro's story was not unique. It was emblematic of how vulnerability intersects with power, often leading to tragedy. Their union was a microcosm of Uganda's broader divides: North versus West, civilian versus military, poverty versus privilege. Kazini, the war hero turned accused plunderer, and Dwaro, the survivor seeking security, where they were bound by attraction but doomed by imbalance. As the relationship soared, the stage was set for that explosive morning in Namuwongo. Let's walk through that fateful morning on November 10th in 2009, because the details paint a vivid, harrowing picture of escalating terror, a brawl that turned fatal in the blink of an eye. Kazini and Dwaro returned home around 5 a.m. after a night out, already locked in an argument that had been simmering. The couple had been drinking, and the tensions were high. Kazini, with his history of impulsivity and alcohol-fueled outbursts, accused Dwaro of stealing his money and bringing other men into the house. Jealousy again. Inside the modest living room, cluttered with everyday items, the quarrel exploded into physical violence. Kazini, a man hardened by years of combat, punched Dwaro's head, slapped her repeatedly, and attempted to strangle her, his hands leaving fingernail scratches on 8 sides of her neck and a 3 by 3 centimeter abrasion bruise on the back of her right hand. Dwaro pleaded with him to leave her alone, her voice echoing in the small space. But he pressed on, throwing her onto the sofa in a display of dominancy. The fight had two distinct stages, as detailed in a court testimony. The first began upon their arrival, with Kazini berating Draru while she cried or remained silent, asking him repeatedly to leave so she could rest. Proskovia Tobaru, Draru's niece, who lived with her and slept in a nearby room, was awakened by the noise. She testified that this was the first time she witnessed them quarrel. Though her police statement mentioned frequent arguments, a contradiction the court noted but deemed minor, possibly due to trauma or language barrier. The couple spoke in English and Uganda, which Proskovia didn't fully understand. The second stage erupted shortly after 6 a.m. Kazini accused Draru of theft again. She denied it, walked toward Proskovia's room and begged him to leave. Kazini followed, assaulting her as they moved through the house. In the sitting room, he smashed a glass on the table and hurled the whiskey bottle at her, missing and hitting a chair instead, littering the floor with shards. A scene of chaos captured in crime scene photos showing broken glass and overturned furniture, indicative of prior violence. Draru testified that during the first stage, Kazini had threatened her life multiple times, even pulling a gun earlier that night before calming down. When she knelt and pleaded, this piece was corroborated by the recovery of a loaded revolver from his car, lending credence to her fear. As the assault intensified, Draru walked away from her aggressor, pleading for mercy, but Kazini persisted. And after the physical fight paused, Draru had a brief window to escape further violence, but the dynamics shifted. Kazini grabbed her handbag and phone, ordered her to leave the house, and tried to lock her out. Then he demanded his portraits, collected his magazines from the sitting room, and headed for the door. As he did, he snarled that he was going to fetch his revolver from the car and kill her. A threat Draru actually took seriously, knowing he was armed because he had threatened her before. The car was parked just outside the perimeter wall's only exit, making flight impossible without confronting him. Terrified, with no viable escape, the back door leading to a walled compound, Draru rushed to her bedroom, grabbed the a hollow iron bar, likely a tool or like household item, and struck Kazini from behind as he faced the exit. She hit him once on the back, causing him to fall, and then she hit him again, but this time on the head. The pathologist later determined he sustained at least 5 blows, not 2, leading to extensive skull and brain injuries, excessive bleeding, and death from trauma. Proskovia witnessed the strikes, hearing cries but missing some dialogue in Uganda. Draru didn't flee. Shocked and remorseful, she alerted neighbors and confessed immediately. It was a desperate response to abuse in a home meant for safety. A home meant for safety but transformed into a battlefield by power and rage. Kampala reeled. A top general dead, even though not anymore, killed by his mistress in a domestic dispute. The Uganda police force moved fast, under immense public and political scrutiny, as the nation mourned a controversial hero. Some mourned him, others didn't. By 6 a.m., neighbors reported the body after Draru's confession. Police arrived at the Namuwongo scene, finding Kazini in a pool of blood on the floor.
By the time I arrived, he wasn't dead. The blood was still coming out fresh. So he died almost when it is becoming early morning. Yeah. Now Lydia was unconscious by that time because she wasn't herself.
Draru repeated her confession. I killed him, but it was an accident. I didn't intend to do that, citing self-defense against his assault and gun threat. A loaded revolver was recovered from Kazini's car bag, supporting her fear for her life. Officer Robert Ikut documented everything. Photos admitted as exhibits. They showed horrendous external head injuries and a house sketch. Pathologist Dr. Thaddeus Barungu conducted the post-mortem, confirming trauma was the cause. Extensive skull fractures and brain injuries from blunt force are not natural, so they are not natural causes. Dr. Susan Nabada examined Draru the same day, finding her mentally sound, so she was ruling out insanity, but with injuries from Kazini's assault, neck scratches and a hand bruise. DNA analysis on the iron bar matched, of course, Kazini's blood, and no other suspects emerged. Proskovia's testimony was key, though her inconsistencies claiming this was the first quarrel in court but frequent in her police statement were attributed to trauma, language issues, or fear. Neighbors witnessed Draru's post-incident conduct, distraught but cooperative. And Kazini's family, including his wife Phoebe and children, demanded justice. But whispers of his abusive side surfaced. His drinking, his jealousy, and prior threats. Political ties raised interference fears. Kazini was disgruntled, facing court-martial fallout, and some speculated foul play beyond Draru. However, evidence pointed to a domestic brawl gone fatal. Draru was charged with murder by November 17, 2009, after interrogations and medical examinations. Kazini's death sparked national debate on domestic violence, accelerating scrutiny on military men's private lives. Lydia Draru's trial began in 2010 at the Kampala High Court under Justice Monica K. Mujenyi. A landmark case blending love, violence, power, and the nuances of self-defense in Ugandan law. It lasted over a year, culminating in a detailed 2011 judgment that dissected every element. Draru pleaded not guilty to murder, but guilty to manslaughter, insisting on self-defense. The prosecution, unwilling to downgrade, pushed for murder, arguing malice, aforethought from the weapon and blows. Let's talk about the indictment. About November 10, 2009 in Namuwongo, Draru murdered Kazini by hitting him with that iron bar. Justice Mugenyi adopted a procedure from legal texts, deferring the manslaughter plea until after the murder trial. If acquitted of murder, she'd be sentenced for manslaughter. If convicted, the lesser plea would remain on the file. So no facts were agreed. Prosecution called 6 witnesses. Dr. Thaddeus Barungu, who gave the detailed post-mortem, Kazini, 52, identified by Dr. Kyomgisha Juliet, died from extensive skull or brain injuries via trauma, with at least 5 head blows, and it wasn't natural. The second witness was Dr. Susan Nabada, who examined Draru, confirming sound mind, but assault injuries were real. Third witness was Proskovia Toboru, who eyed the events, the quarrels, the assaults, and the strikes. The fourth person was the DNA analysis to match the blood of on the bar to Kazini. The next one, the person who was at the scene, Officer Robert Ikut, who described the chaotic room and recovered the revolver. Another witness was a neighbor who saw Draru's post-murder behavior. Defense called Draru as a sole witness only, recounting the abuse, threats, and self-defense act. So to prove murder, prosecution needed fact of death established by post-mortem witnesses, unlawful death presumed unless excusable like self-defense, malice aforethought, intent to kill or grievous harm, participation by Draru, who admitted she did it, but context disputed. Court found death unlawful, rejecting full self-defense. Force was excessive, as fight had paused. Though threat was real, no malice, so manslaughter conviction. Sentence, she was given 14 years and considering remorse. Abuse history and first offense. Draru served at Luzira and was released on August 2021 or January 2021 per some reports, not so sure. There are different reports on that. So after 10 years with remission for good behavior, no successful appeals, she lives quietly in Kampala. Delays frustrated Kazini's family though, but justice, flawed and debated, prevailed, highlighting self-defense limits. Kazini's death didn't just shock Uganda, it ignited a reckoning with domestic violence, reshaping conversations, policies and perceptions in a society where such issues were often silenced. Military circles mourned a hero, holding vigils and tributes, but women's groups seized the moment, organizing rallies in Kampala, demanding protections for victims. And in a country where cultural norms often condemn male dominance, bride price symbolizing ownership, and military men viewed as untouchable, this case flipped the narrative. Kazini's murder, by a woman half his size, challenged the invincibility of powerful men and highlighted how abuse cuts across class and status. The Domestic Violence Act (DVA) of 2010 was passed months later, with activists citing Kazini's death as a catalyst. Reports noted it redefined domestic violence and added momentum to its passage, as the high-profile nature exposed the epidemic statistics showing rising cases with women and sometimes men suffering in silence due to stigma, economic dependence, and weak enforcement. Elders in Acholi and Western communities debated power dynamics, with women like Draru from modest backgrounds entangled with influential men, facing abuse without recourse. And then there were very many posts, Twitter, now X, from 2009, that echoed outrage. You know, Kazini's death exposes how men in uniform terrorize at home, yet stigma persists. More men killed in DV than women in some reports, but attitudes blame victims or minimize private matters. Her release in 2021 sparked mixed reactions. Some saw redemption and a survivor, others injustice for Kazini's family. His burial in Hoima was a state affair. Kazini's case pushed Uganda toward better laws, but implementation lags, with DV still rampant. Tonight, as we leave Kampala, remember, survival isn't always clean. Sometimes it's an iron bar in trembling hands, a split-second decision against overwhelming odds. Sometimes it's fighting back against the one who swore to protect you but became the threat. Lydia Draru trusted a general but faced his fury in the intimacy of her home. Power can corrupt love into control, turning homes into battlegrounds and trust into a trap. Anyway, thank you for joining me in the Rift, exploring every layer of this complex tale. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay safe,